What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 4th, 2020, start of a brand new week of insanity here. We've got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are closed for the first hour. More on that in just a little bit. And basically, today is the day that the new phone rules go into effect. And the rules are very simple. Hour number one, I'm going to do news and commentary. We will take phone calls in hour number two only. And one call per caller per day, one topic per caller per day, and no personal attacks on other callers. If you disagree with what they said, that's one thing. And you're free to disagree with the ideas they put out, but no more personal attacks here. I've got a drop button. I'm not afraid to use it. All right, so let's get into the news here a little bit. Today is the 50th anniversary of the Kent State murders, and if you're my age, you remember what an absolute shock that was to the nation when protesting students who were protesting the Vietnam War were fired on by the Ohio National Guard, resulting in, I think it was something like 4 deaths and 9 injuries. And there was never an investigation as to why the National Guard gave the order to fire on the students who were not armed, who were not attacking them. Now, the story I heard was that there was an undercover FBI informant on the campus who fired off a starter pistol. And that's what spooked the National Guard commander into opening fire. But there was never an investigation. Nobody was ever charged. So, anyway. Now, I hate being right all the time, but over the weekend we saw a couple of very alarming stories about how Hillary Clinton is ready to step in if Joe Biden steps out of the Democratic nomination, you know, as Biden stumbles, as they like to put it. And I hate being right all the time, but yeah, Hillary's making her move now. And she's telegraphing the message, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me, because the Democratic leadership has to realize that between his obvious dementia, his track record of videos of inappropriately touching young girls, and now something, I think it's up to 9 different accusations of sexual harassment, that Biden is unelectable. So they got to do something as we come into the convention season. Hillary's out there saying, yeah, I'm ready. I'm tanned, rested, and ready to, let's go. Now, interestingly enough, former presidential advisor Douglas McKinnon wrote an opinion piece over at The Hill in which he said that if Joe Biden exits the presidential race, Democrats might be able to nominate former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton along with former President Barack Obama as her running mate. Now, this is a very, very interesting development for 2 reasons. First of all, I don't believe in this nation's history there's ever been a president who went on to serve as vice president. And the reason I think is very, very simple. Presidents are allowed 2 terms only. And Barack Obama's had his 2. Which means that if they were to run this ticket and they were to win and something happened to Hillary, and we know that her health is not good, we're faced with a problem. Barack Obama cannot serve as president. That means it would go over to the Speaker of the House. Hopefully will not be Nancy Pelosi. But it could provoke a constitutional crisis. Now, speaking of Joe Biden, DNC chairman is out there trying to defend Biden over the sexual assault allegations and say, this is like Hillary's emails. There's nothing there, except that we don't really know. Hang on a second. Oh, Claire, I have them in here. Sorry about that, folks, but here we go. All right, there we are. There you are. All right, so all is now well in Halle Rivero. All right, so they're saying this is like Hillary's emails. There's nothing there. And of course, that's silly to say because we know that looking at Hillary's email situation, we don't know. She erased 33,000 emails. Everybody's scrambling trying to find them. They found classified information in the emails that were turned over. They found Title 18 violations, felony Title 18 violations. So there is a there. So I'm not sure that trying to equate the sexual assault to Hillary's emails is really a smart way to go. Biden's definitely in trouble here. Now, as we get closer to the election, everybody's scrambling for any advantage they can get. And apparently the Democrats are deploying a DARPA-funded, artificial intelligence-driven information warfare tool. Now, this was developed to try and track down and fight ISIS propaganda. But they're retooling it now to basically keep an eye out for pro-Trump accounts so that they can be countered or defeated somehow. And the initiative was reported by the Washington Post. It's called Defeat Disinfo, which uses AI and network analysis to map discussion of the president's claims on social media. I almost consider this to be an act of desperation myself here. So let's talk about Michael Flynn. We're still waiting to hear the judge's decision in that case. And apparently it's come on out that Michael Flynn was not the objective of the campaign against him. He was considered an obstacle toward preserving the Trump-Russia probe, and that's why they had to get rid of him. That's why they set him up. And they did. They set him up, absolutely. There's no question about that now. Now, the latest Department of Justice documents released in the Flynn case revealed that the Obama White House was running the operation. This went all the way to the top. They want to run that guy as vice president. I don't think Obama would accept. You know, he wants to be remembered as the president, not the president and vice president. The president, then the vice president. Turning to the international news, the United States is attempting to rewrite history in order to impose further sanctions on Iran. And this goes back to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the P5+1 deal. Now, on May 8th, 2018, President Trump withdrew from the P5+1 deal. And now they're trying to say, well, no, we didn't really withdraw from the P5+1 deal. And so we're still a participant. This is coming from Pompeo. And we're a participating nation, and therefore we have the right to impose more sanctions on Iran, which is a bit of a reach. Because you're either part of a treaty or you are not. And if you're not part of the treaty, if you've withdrawn from the treaty, then you have no recourse of action. But what they're trying is these little semantic gymnastics is to say, well, maybe we pulled out, but we didn't really pull out all the way, and therefore we're going to impose more sanctions on Iran. And nobody's going to fall for this in the international scene. Everybody understands what's going on here. The U.S. is standing history on its head, standing truth on its head. The U.S. State Department is out there saying that Russia and China have no reason to vote against prolonging the Iran arms embargo. And according to Secretary of State, senior advisor to the Secretary of State, Brian Hook, is saying Russia and China have great equities in a peaceful and stable and Middle East. Well, don't we all, actually? Iran's sectarian violence and its weapons is the principal driver of instability in the Middle East today. Well, there's a whopper right there. I'll give that one 3.5 Pinocchios. And he's saying because they voted on the embargo in the past, there is no reason for them not to do so now. Now, the Russian envoy is out there blasting the U.S. for claiming to still be part of the Iran nuclear deal. I told you nobody was going to buy it. You're either in for the deal with all of its aspects, or you're not. And you can't go into a deal and say, well, we're not going to honor our side of it, but you still have to honor your side of it. That's not a deal. That's dictatorship. Now, tensions are building over in the Persian Gulf here. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Navy chief has said that a recent incident with U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf happened as they entered a drill area despite having been warned in advance not to approach it. In other words, the U.S. Navy sailed into an area where Iran said, we have an exercise going on, please stay out. And the U.S. Navy sailed on in, and that led to the confrontation. And of course, the U.S. came out and said, well, those gosh darn Iranian warships in their drill area, they harassed our ships. How dare they do that? Well, what were you doing there? They're having a drill, which they're allowed to do. They made it very clear there was a drill going on in the area, and they said other ships should keep out. This is no different than when we have a NOTAM here in the United States of America. You know, we're out there in this part of the ocean or this part of the sky shooting things that go bang. Please stay away. Now, Israel has been bombing Syria again. They claim it's directed against Hezbollah. This may be the beginning of the push to establish greater Israel, because Israel's also making stink face over at Iran. And Syria, of course, wants the Golan back, especially now that they've found all that oil and gas underneath it. This article troubles me, and it's part of a series of articles we have seen recently discussing the usability of nuclear weapons. This is from Sputnik News. And the U.S. Air Force claims it's ready to use the nuclear arsenal despite the coronavirus pandemic. I'm not sure what coronavirus has to do with it one way or the other. But the COVID-19 outbreak has not spared the American military, affecting 2 of its aircraft carriers, several foreign bases, and at least 6,700 service people. They're still saying they're combat ready and prepared to utilize the nuclear arsenal if the U.S. ends up in a major armed conflict, even despite the challenges posed by the coronavirus outbreak. Now, my understanding is that Cheyenne Mountain has been reactivated. They refurbished the place, new carpeting, ashtrays, all of that. And, pardon me, there is a crew that is inside there isolated, so the coronavirus cannot get in there. Cheyenne Mountain is where the big button gets pushed. I'm very alarmed at all this talk of nuclear weapons. Israel's unity government ushers in endgame for 2 states. It took 1 year, 3 elections, and a global pandemic, but Israel finally has a new government, and this time it's one with a broader mandate than any other in recent memories, mostly including the annexation of the West Bank. And they're saying they can do it without having to consult with Palestine, which goes from annexation to outright conquest. China is warning the United States of a possible armed conflict with the United States over the backlash from coronavirus. They're very upset that everybody in the United States is out there saying, oh, this is all China's fault. It may have been an accident, but, you know, China, they lied. You know, they lied to us when they said this was a dangerous virus, and they lied to us, and they were hoarding medical supplies, and they were doing all these bad things. And it's so over the top that even China got involved, and they made a parody video, which, if you see it, it really lays out what the 2 nations have been saying to each other. This idea that this could go to an armed conflict. And of course, the United States is pressing China's buttons in the South China Sea and Taiwan. So here we are in the middle of this pandemic, and the push for World War III continues. It's very, very troubling. Now, Moscow is concerned, as am I, over all this talk about low-yield nuclear weapons. Russia is saying that this makes atomic war more likely. You know, when the bombs were these big multi-megaton city busters, everybody had a good reason to not let those things fly. Now we're in the age of the tactical nuke. And the U.S. Navy has already fielded the first batch of W-76-2 low-yield submarine-launched ballistic missile warheads. And a paper by the State Department's Bureau of Arms Control aimed to explain the reasoning behind this move and debunk the critics. But yeah, if you've got small nukes, you're more likely to use them. And once you start using the small nukes, what prevents you from resorting to the big nukes when you run out of small nukes? Now, most of the modern nuclear arsenal is selectable yield. There's usually 2 or 3 different yields that are available at launch time. I think a nuclear war would be a really, really bad idea. Over in Afghanistan, the U.S. military is out there warning of responses if the Taliban violence continues. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Maybe it means, we'll slog around your mountains for another 18 years, accomplishing absolutely nothing. Over in Korea, a couple of developments. Kim Jong-un has been seen back in public. They're now denying there was any surgery involved. Photos of him indicate needle marks on his hands, and the latest story is that he has suffered a mild stroke, but he's come back from it, and he's still running North Korea. Maybe. Hard to get information. But right now, apparently, North Korea fired gunshots at a South Korean guard post in the DMZ, and the gunfire hit the wall but did not injure anyone or cause any discernible damage to the guard post or its equipment. The South Korean military responded by broadcasting a verbal warning and returning fire twice. Over in Venezuela, they're reporting an attempted naval incursion by mercenaries from Colombia. Why does the name Bay of Pigs keep echoing through my head? Okay. The Venezuelan armed forces and police have thwarted an attempted naval invasion by mercenaries attempting to enter the country by sea from neighboring Colombia. The world's gone insane. It really has gone insane. Okay, the Office of the Inspector General, U.S. Department of Defense, is determining if it should allocate more funds to hypersonic development programs, as it seems the U.S. is behind the hypersonic curve. And we're talking, of course, about missiles that can travel at least 5 times the speed of sound. Other countries are way ahead of us. But what they're looking at now is increasing investments in development of these Mach 5 missiles. The Pentagon's fiscal 2021 budget earmarks $3.2 billion, up from $400 million approved in 2020. Planned spending on hypersonics would reach upward of $12.6 billion by 2025. Yep, nation full of homeless people, but by golly, there's plenty of money for these weapons. Okay. The U.S. has deployed heavy bombers and hundreds of airmen to Guam to deter China. Now, how would you feel if that read that China deploys heavy bombers and hundreds of airmen to Hawaii to deter the United States? See, it's the United States that's sending weapons everywhere. I mean, we've got a NATO fleet in the Barents Sea for the first time since 1980. We're tooling around the Persian Gulf, tooling around the Western Pacific. You can see which nation it is that's out there that needs to be deterred. You don't see Iranian warships in the Gulf of Mexico. You don't see Chinese warships down by Baja. We know who it is who's pushing the buttons on all of this. So they deployed the B-1B Lancers to Guam, and they're out there making stink face at the Chinese. So let's talk about COVID-19. I mean, looking at the corporate news, it's still all COVID all the time. Today is the day where a lot of states are starting to open things back up. Here in Indiana, you can now go back into the liquor stores instead of having to be curbside only. Restaurants are opening up their dining rooms, that kind of thing. And it's going to be slow. A lot of people are still very concerned. The fear, the fear-mongering, the panic-mongering really did take an effect. And a lot of people are still very, very concerned. We're also seeing a lot of censorship on social media. Anti-quarantine protesters are being kicked off Facebook and quickly finding a refuge over at a news site that seems to be free of censorship right now. It's called MeWe, M-E-W-E. And might want to check that out. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about how social media is filtering and banning and doing all those things that, well, George Orwell wrote about in 1984 here. Over at Google, they're autocorrecting all searches for Biden allegations to Kavanaugh allegations. If you go to Google and search Biden allegations, you're redirected to a search page of articles about accusations made against Brett Kavanaugh. And up at the top it says, did you mean Kavanaugh allegations? If you do a search for Tara Reid, you're auto-corrected to Christine Blasey Ford. Now, Google is out there assuring everyone that this is just another one of those unintentional glitches that just so happens to help cover for Democrats. You know, just one of those pesky bugs in the code that by complete coincidence and totally unintentionally helps cover up a Democratic scandal. But rest assured, they're looking into it. All righty. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi is actually blocking investigations into the Chinese coronavirus origins and the U.S. tax money into the Wuhan laboratory. Apparently, she's still obsessing about investigating Donald Trump for, well, whatever she's obsessing about. Probably it's his handling the coronavirus. We don't care where it came from, but by golly, the president mishandled this and we've got to go after him again. Talk about obsessive compulsive behavior. All right. Serbia cautiously eases their lockdown, plans to restart public transport. Poland is going to reopen hotels and shopping malls on, well, actually as of today. Kansas City will now allow religious gatherings, but requires records of all attendees. Now, one of the things that is a major problem is everywhere that it's starting to open up, they're saying that stores and restaurants and so forth can operate at 25% of their capacity. Now, most business models are going to show you that they're hoping to have 80 to 90% capacity just to meet their overhead. And forcing companies to basically limit themselves to 25% of their normal trade, that's the death blow. They're not going to survive that way. They absolutely will not. And a fifth of retailers say they've shut their doors permanently because their businesses have been wrecked. Over in Britain, a third of the whole economy has shut down. Okay. Now, as you remember from last week, President Trump signed an executive order to try and get these meat packing plants back online, and was met with resistance from the workers saying the conditions are terrible, we're not being given protective equipment, and we're not going to go. Presidential executive order or not, and technically they're correct. Presidential executive orders are binding only on parts of the federal government, of the executive branch. That's all they're really good for. The president cannot sign an executive order that actually compels ordinary citizens not in the government to do anything. But it may backfire on the workers because the same companies that make those robots that assemble cars and airplanes and TVs and computers and everything are assembling robots that will actually work in the slaughterhouses. So we may see a cybernetics revolution in the supply chain for your hamburgers. Well, why not? We've got robots actually cooking and delivering the hamburgers in fast food restaurants. Not too successfully yet, but they'll get there. Give it time. Apparently, Iowa is sending the National Guard to safeguard the supply chain. They are that concerned over there. And by the way, if you don't have a chest freezer, good luck trying to find one. Apparently, they started running out of those right after they ran out of the toilet paper. Because in many parts of the countries, you can go to the slaughterhouses and buy meat in bulk. You'll literally buy a quarter or a half of a pig or a cow, and it'll cost you, but nowhere near what it costs in the supermarket. And then they'll slice it up for you, and you take it home, you put it in your chest freezer. And that would be a good thing to be able to do right now. But we've been looking for a chest freezer, and they are not to be had. Okay, let's talk about the economy now. Every bear market gives bulls one last grand chance to get out. Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft all back to their highs. This is the boomers' last chance to cash out their retirement. Everybody is expecting there to be a major downturn. And as a matter of fact, last Friday, the market closed deep in the red. For some reason, Fox News is not showing the market close for today. Article out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. 100 million people in cities around the world will fall into poverty because of the coronavirus. World Bank is warning. Densely populated cities are on the front line for the outbreak, especially in slums where people are lacking running water, sewage systems, or health care. These problems will be harder to solve because cities will see a drop of 15 to 25% ex-tax in tax revenues as a result of the crisis. Out in California, homeless advocates are literally trying to take over hotels and saying this hotel is now commandeered. The police have removed them, but it does indicate we're reaching a breaking point. And if you think about how many homeless people are really out there, were they to get organized, they would be a force to be reckoned with. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economics. And you've probably heard the statistic that approximately 30 million Americans filed for unemployment in the past 6 weeks. That number may be low. According to an online poll by Economic Policy Institute, millions of Americans who've been thrown out of work during the pandemic have been unable to register for unemployment benefits. The poll found that for every 10 people who have successfully filed unemployment claims, 3 to 4 have been unable to register, and another 2 people may not have even tried. Now, if you take that and you run it backward through the equations, then we're talking 50 million Americans have lost their job in the past 6 weeks. Landlords are bracing for a huge wave of rental defaults after more than 30 million Americans applied for unemployment. Well, obviously an older headline. Right now, there is a growing rent protest. It says, can't pay, won't pay. Well, if you can't pay, obviously you won't pay. And the landlords are out there countering, trying to say, look, we have to make payments, to the banks for the property that we bought. So it always goes back to those banks and to compound interest. So there are renter strikes that are forming up in major cities across the United States. Protests. And it's only going to get worse. Now, this is something that Claire and I actually ran into. A lot of people are taking their enforced house arrest and they're realizing how cluttered their place is. And so they're going through their homes and they're saying, do we really use this? Do we really need this? No, let's get rid of it. So they're bagging up stuff to donate to the Goodwill, old clothes, old appliances, things they're not using anymore, to try and get them out there for people who might actually need this stuff. And then they show up at like the collection centers and they're closed because of the COVID virus. So they're all loaded up and nowhere to go. And we went through this ourselves. We had a bunch of stuff we wanted to donate to the Goodwill, old clothing and whatnot. And we got down there and the door was closed and the sign was up saying, closed until the pandemic is over, which we don't know when that's going to be. So it's a little frustrating. You're trying to do the right thing. Okay, 95% of companies who have applied for Protect Payroll funding are still waiting. And as a result, 58% of small businesses have pushed through with layoffs. So it didn't work. Mostly because it didn't work. Now, the bottom 50% of consumers were not in great shape before the recession. Now, 15% of households expect to be delinquent on their loans in the next 3 months. And again, I hate to say I told you so, and this time I really feel bad about it. But I think over the past year, we were saying, get your debt load down. Do without the new things, do without the latest and greatest. Just work on getting those credit cards down, getting those loans down. And those people who took that advice are doing a lot better than those who kept their credit cards maxed out. Chris Whalen is out there saying that mortgage defaults may be worse than in 2008 and 2009. And you remember what that was like with the collapse of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Goldman's still committed to the strength in equities being a bear market rally. Maybe. Most people probably are not aware of this, but when the crash of 29 hit, there had been a previous crash 2 months before. And the market had rebounded. Everybody said, whoo, well, we escaped that. We're in good shape now. And that's when the big one really hit. As U.S. unemployment skyrockets, the super wealthy are getting much richer. The billionaire class in the U.S. is seeing its wealth skyrocket thanks to the CARES Act government bailout. So once again, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. All right, over at Guggenheim, Minard warns the Fed is pushing the U.S. toward a populist revolt and saying we'll never return to free market capitalism. Okay. Nancy Pelosi is back out there saying that a minimum guaranteed income may be worthy of our attention. Well, she's been pushing this for a long time, and it sounds good. Okay, you get to sit at home, and the government will send you money to live on. And the problem is, who pays for it all? You're not going to get the money from the billionaire class. You know, they'll spend millions to avoid paying taxes, and they've got it to spend. They'll shelter their money someplace. So where are you going to get the money? Are you just going to keep on inflating the dollar until it's completely and utterly worthless, like the Zimbabwe dollar? Remember, we had that paper note, $1 quadrillion, or was it $100 trillion? They never got to a quadrillion note before the whole thing fell apart. But they're pushing socialism. And socialism doesn't work. Look at the history of the Soviet Union, and you'll see that there's a problem there. And even with socialism, there was still a rigid class structure for the supposedly classless society. He's out there still pushing that. Okay, now, here's an interesting little idea. Restaurants across the United States are turning their parking lots into drive-in movie theaters, and they're finding a huge success. In fact, the few remaining real drive-in movie theaters are doing very well. You know, they'll say, keep a space between each two cars, so they're operating at 50% capacity, but people are showing up to see the latest movies. And they're maintaining social distance over there in the concession stands. So people are getting very creative, and it's working. And apparently there's a church that managed to get their hands on an old used drive-in movie lot, and they're holding their services there. Good for them. And have started their mass manufacturing exodus from China. The Japanese government is funding this to bring manufacturing back to their country. Why are we not doing the same? Why is the United States, for all Donald Trump's talk about Make America Great and restoring manufacturing to this country, we're not really seeing much of it. And that's because it is still financially advantageous to be manufacturing overseas. And there's no money to help bring the manufacturing back home. We're talking about transporting heavy machinery in many cases. Now, Bangladesh has restarted 500 garment plants supplying to global brands. India is debating the easing of curbs. The problem with Bangladesh is that because shopping malls are not really functioning in the United States, people aren't buying those branded clothes anymore. So the workers are being allowed to resume work wearing masks and maintaining physical distancing. Some of the world's biggest clothing firms source their supplies from Bangladesh, and they've lost billions of dollars. Over in China, they're calling for the dollar to be dethroned, saying that the U.S. has weaponized it, which is true enough. Let's talk about immigration, citizenship, and so forth. Albania is going to bring migrants from Turkey to a Greek region. Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama has made a deal with Turkish President Recep Erdogan to bring illegal migrants from Turkey's massive reception centers to the Greek region of Albania, as reported by Albanian media. The two countries recently signed a defense cooperation treaty. While its specifics have not yet been publicized, the Albanian news media is reporting that a leak shows that one of its clauses allows for the relocation of 30,000 asylum seekers and illegal migrants from Turkey to northern Epirus this year. Going out there. Okay, Hungarian minister embarrasses CNN fake news journalist Christina Manpour. Okay, apparently Christina Manpour asked the Hungarian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Peter, forgive me how I pronounce this, Szijjártó, why Parliament is closed during the coronavirus outbreak, and he calmly told her he'd spoken to the Parliament 5 times that very week. And apparently, Christina Manpour, displaying her loyalty to CNN's inaccuracies, said, okay, that's news to us. Anyway, you would think after all the embarrassments that we have seen over the last several years, that corporate media would start to get its act together. But they're still out there, even just making dumb mistakes. Forget about the deliberate propaganda. Forget about the spin cycle. Forget about damage control or catapulting the propaganda. Just dumb mistakes like using old, outdated photos and stuff. You'd think they would wise up. But instead, they just go over to Facebook and Google and say, look, ban these people. They're pointing out where we're making mistakes, and we can't be seen to be making mistakes. Now, a little bit of good news. Over in Paris, work is going to resume on the Notre Dame Cathedral even amid the lockdown. And they want to complete renovations on the church before the 2024 Summer Olympics. So it looks like they may be on schedule for that. It was such a shame when that happened. Okay, this last week we had this large asteroid, about half the size of Mount Everest, flew past Earth at a distance of 3.9 million miles. It never came close. I know there was a stuff out on social media where people were saying, oh, it's the end of the world, it's coming on in. They're still screaming that Atlas is going to crash into the Earth. It's not even close, and it's already broken up. And now the latest rumor, unfounded on social media, is that NASA intercepted Comet Atlas and blew it to bits. No, it's called tidal forces. The sun tore it apart. Now, this one is very interesting, and I'll tell you why. This is a story that came out of Science Daily, and it's based on fossil evidence. The human language pathway in the brain has been identified as being at least 25 million years old, 20 million years older than previously thought. In other words, human beings, or their forebears, to be more accurate, were capable of spoken speech like we do today 25 million years ago. Now, when you have speech, you're able to teach. You're able to pass things along generation to generation. And it raises the question, we have an accurate, more or less, history of the human race dating back basically to the end of the last ice age. And that's it. Everything before that was obliterated. And you sort of have to wonder what happened in all that time. 25 million years ago, 20 million years ago, even just 10 million years ago, even just a million years ago. What were humans doing? And to me, it's very difficult to think that over 25 million years was caveman, 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 up in the tree, down on the ground, caveman, 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 technological society. And I think the human race has been advanced on numerous occasions. And it's been repetitively destroyed by the cycling ice ages or by our own stupidity. And it sort of makes you kind of wonder what really ancient history might be like. It'd be fun to find out, I think. Anyway, the Hubble Space Telescope has captured incredible images of Comet Atlas shattering into dozens of pieces the size of a house. So it's not going to be the big spectacle that a lot of people thought. You can still see it with a decent backyard telescope here. All right, so let's bash on Common Core, something I like to do an awful lot. Common Core curriculum was adopted as a standard 6 years ago, and it was promoted as improving the international competitiveness of U.S. students in math and reading because we were behind at the time. Well, after 6 years of this, Okay, a new study from the Pioneer Institute is showing that reading and math scores in the U.S. have suffered an historic decline following the implementation of Common Core. It didn't solve the problem, it made it worse. And I got to see some of the Common Core curriculum. The way they were teaching math, it was like crippling kids. It wasn't simple. It was obfuscated to the extreme. And you have to wonder, what were these people thinking? By the way, as a side note, apparently during this whole homeschooling situation, parents have been going to Google to relearn basic math skills that they obviously had forgotten since they were in school. But at least the kids are getting taught, and taught simple ways to do things. But Common Core is a complete and utter failure. Absolute, complete, and utter failure, according to this study from the Pioneer Institute. All right, the Secretive X-37B Spaceplane is launching its 6th mission this month. This one is expected to break its previous record of 780 days in low orbit, and people still don't know what the heck that thing is doing up there. Is it just a technology demonstrator, or is it in fact on some kind of an active mission? Is it really powered by solar cells, or is it nuclear powered? Nobody really knows. Cute little sucker, though. Now, Michael Moore, I have a hug and a punch relationship with him. I love about half of his movies. I loved Roger and Me. I loved Canadian Bacon, one of my favorite films, Canadian Bacon. I didn't like some of his others, especially pushing liberal gun control. The one that tried to say that Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11. But apparently his new film targets renewables and accused the green groups of being in big energy's pockets, and it's hit a nerve. Now, the film is called Planet of the Humans. It's actually been put out online so you can see it for free. It was directed by Jeff Gibbs, and it's been viewed over 4 million times on YouTube in just over a week. But just 2 days after the film's release, time for Earth Day, filmmaker Josh Fox led the charge to have Moore, once a hero of his, deplatformed over alleged disinformation. Fox demanded not only a retraction and apology for Moore, but for the film to be yanked from distribution entirely. Well, you know, the whole idea of the First Amendment is that everybody gets to express their point of view. And if you disagree, you can have a debate. But when you go on out there and say, don't let anybody else see this, that's not democracy. It's not a republic. It's not freedom of speech. We're going to take a break for commercial. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're coming up on the top of the hour when we're going to start taking phone calls here. And even though I'm well ensconced over here in Indiana, I still miss Hawaii. But not this next part of it. Apparently, U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal technicians had to detonate 2 World War II era bombs that were discovered in the waters near Oahu, in this channel between Lanikai Beach and Mokulua North on Oahu, otherwise known as the Island of the Plastic Birds. And apparently a snorkeler discovered the munitions, contacted the Coast Guard, which alerted the Navy, and the Navy went on out there and blew them up. So, you know, we really shouldn't be starting a new world war until we've really cleaned up from the last one. I mean, that's just common sense. Let's clean up the room, you know, get everything nice and neat, then we'll have another world war. Fortunately, NASA's budget is being cut, and it's being cut to the point where ongoing missions like the Curiosity rover may be adversely affected. Now, it hasn't completed its original objective, which was to drive to the top of this mountain. And they're saying we may have to slam on the brakes. Just leave it sitting there unfinished. As long as they don't shut down the command receiver, it could be reactivated. But again, we've got all this money for hypersonic war missiles and B-1B Lancer bombers and Zumwalt destroyers and aircraft carriers and everything. And if you really look at the scale of spending, I mean, NASA really doesn't take that much money. Americans spend more on pizza than we do on space exploration. And I, for one, think that that's absolutely a shame. I'm willing to give up a pizza if it'll help Curiosity. I should start a GoFundMe for Curiosity. keep that mission going. So anyway, if you are a stargazer, this week the Eta Aquarius meteor shower is in the morning sky, and in fact it's peaking tonight. So you may, if you have clear skies, which we do not today, you might want to get out there with your binoculars and take a peek. I'm certainly going to take a peek. Okay, so getting into, somebody wrote on in and said that the Google substitution of Kavanaugh for Biden happens only inside the United States, and that in foreign countries it's not visible. It doesn't happen. So it's only you Americans that are being blindfolded by Google. And that tells us right there, this is not just a software bug. This is deliberate censorship. This is memory holing Joe Biden. This is right out of 1984. And so I'm personally going to check out this MeWe social media platform that so far appears to be censorship free, because I'm not going to deal with Google anymore, and I'm not going to deal with Facebook anymore or Twitter, because they're completely controlled. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll start taking phone calls after the break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And one of the reasons NASA's budget may be extraordinarily tight has to do with their new disposable rocket called the Space Launch System. Apparently, the rocket needs 4 engines. Each engine costs $146 million. So we need to find a cheaper source. Maybe Roscosmos, or we need to just work on having more competition in rocket engine design here in the United States, because that really is a lot of money for a use once and throw away rocket engine. Okay, more than 70% of jobless Americans did not receive their March unemployment benefits. Apparently, the unemployment system is really messed up. As we mentioned in hour number 1, there's a problem with a lot of Americans who are unemployed, who are unable to register for unemployment benefits. Either they can't get through, the offices are closed, or they're simply so overwhelmed they can't answer any more phone calls. Apparently, 70% of jobless Americans did not receive any unemployment benefits. Trump administration is privately projecting a massive spike in coronavirus deaths amid the push for reopening. And, you know, you have the two arguments on each side, dollar signs versus human lives. And it's all muddied by the fact that we don't really have accurate numbers on how bad coronavirus is. In fact, over the weekend, there was a story that CDC reclassified something like 50,000 coronavirus cases as being the ordinary seasonal flu. The U.S. is going to rein in the flood of coronavirus blood tests after false claims and lacks oversight. California counties are set to reopen in defiance of Newsom's lockdowns. This is going to wind up in the court system. Newsom, he's starting to act like that governor over in Michigan, where, by golly, I'm the governor and I'm going to do what I think is right. He's closed all the beaches, but a lot of California counties are saying, we're not going to listen. We're not going to listen, and you can't make us listen. Cuomo is offering a path to reopening parts of upstate New York by May 15th as the coronavirus death toll dips to 226. All right, getting on back to the Michael Flynn case, we're still waiting for a final determination from the judge, but apparently the judge is out there, you know, looking at the case here. Meanwhile, another judge, Judge Janine, is laying out all the facts step by step on Flynn and the scam done on America. And that's absolutely correct. This is not just a scam on Michael Flynn. It's a scam on the country itself. They railroaded this guy as part of their broader effort to try and find a way to get Trump out of power. And I really hope that Michael Flynn is exonerated by the courts. And Trump is already dropping hints that if the judge refuses to dismiss the charges, that there will be a presidential pardon. And I think there ought to be. But obviously, from Flynn's point of view, exoneration is preferable to a pardon. But he'll take the pardon. All right, we've got a caller on the line, Joe in Houston. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I was thinking this weekend about war. And, I'm a 9/11 truther. I'm actually an anti-war protester. But I'm not a pacifist. I mean, I think that, there's rules when I think in our history there was maybe one or two wars that were justified. I mean, the Revolutionary War was justified.
Yes.
Because it was unavoidable. It was in our interest, our national interest, and it was justified. The War of 1812, I don't know. I think that the only good war I could say that's possibly good would be the war against Spain, and that we got so much booty out of it. I mean, okay, maybe the whole main thing was wrong, but I mean, we chased the Spaniards out of South America. We got Puerto Rico. We got the Philippines. So some of the Mexican wars, we got a lot out of it. Whether they're justified or not. But and part of the reason I bring this up is that a lot of your callers, and I'm not trying to insult anyone, I'm just saying they're very, it's like war is, we started some bad wars, with Iran and Afghanistan, and I've been against them all. But when it comes to this bioweapon with the Chinese, I'm hoping the war can be avoided. But they're going to have to pay. We're going to look into this, and they're going to have to pay some kind of a price. And if they don't pay that price, well, sooner or later, it probably will lead to war. But I mean, it turns out that they locked down all their cities from Wuhan, but we're letting people fly out into all the other nations of the world from Wuhan, knowing that they were infecting everywhere. I'm just waiting for the Italians to be outraged. Besides the Americans, they knowingly allowed their people to infect the world, and meanwhile they locked down, Beijing and Shanghai, and then they were hoarding and hogging all the masks and all the emergency equipment, knowing what was coming. And to me, I'm hoping we can avoid war with China, but I think that they're going to have to pay reparations, and a lot of people are going to have to be punished. Maybe we can say, look, if you don't get rid of your leadership that was involved in this, there's going to be punitive action. Maybe put a quarantine on China, a naval blockade. I don't think, this might lead to hundreds of thousands of deaths in this country, and it might lead, and the economic damage that they've done is in the trillions. And I'm, for one, I think if they don't, make recompense, I think a war will be justified. Now, hopefully it can be limited. Hopefully it doesn't get to war. But I'm not one of these guys that just says, "Oh, I'm a pacifist." We went in Afghanistan, therefore every war we're getting involved in is wrong. I don't think so. I think that in certain cases, China needs to be punished as an example to the world, and also to pay back some form of restitution to the damage they've done to the world. And if that means war, I hope it can be avoided. But and at the same time, any Americans involved with the Chinese in this aspect of bioweapons, they need to be arrested and put in prison too. I don't just lay it all easy on the Chinese. I think anybody who has any involvement in this virus needs to be punished. But
okay,
in particular, the Chinese
for
their. Pardon me?
When are you enlisting in the armed forces?
Well, I was in the Armed Forces. I was in the Navy. I'm too old, but I'll go work on the Merchant Marine and bring supplies over there. But I lost my security clearance because of my 9/11 activism.
Oh, I remember.
So,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've done my part, and but once again, I think that if you're going to allow this to go without some kind of response. Now, hopefully war can be avoided, but I think this war is probably going to be inevitable, what's coming with the Chinese. I mean, they're attacking and trying to muscle our naval vessels out of those islands, the Spratlys, and I don't think it's going to take too much to torch something off with them. And that's
you might want to look at it from their point of view. I mean, there's a reason it's called the South China Sea, and this goes back to the Cairo Compact at the end of World War II. where basically all of the victor nations in World War II agreed those islands belong to China. And so now everybody wants to renege on the deal. Vietnam wants to renege on the deal. Japan wants to renege on the deal. From the Chinese point of view, they're right and everybody else is wrong. And let's face it.
My problem isn't with the islands. My problem is not with the islands' ownership. My problem is with them enforcing violating the ability of vessels to transit that area. I mean, I don't really care about if the Philippines owns it or the Chinese own it. My attitude, though,
not
is
impeding
freedom of navigation.
Joe, they're not impeding freedom of navigation. The only ships that there have been confrontations with are ones that sail inside the 12-mile barrier. Now, how do you think the United States would react if, for example, a Chinese ship were to sail the channel between Catalina Island and the mainland U.S.? Because it's 29 miles, there is a narrow channel there that's considered international waters.
Well, I think if that's the case, then they should sail them through. I don't think we should allow that because it's international waters. I think that the Chinese harass our ships when they go between Taiwan and China. The Chinese are notorious about
waters.
I know, and that's my problem with them is that and that's what's going to cause an international conflict. Is the fact that they don't allow freedom of navigation in international waters. I think that that's a standard that we should support as a nation. That's what limits war. The ability of you have your territorial waters, and that's where it ends. I mean, that's part of the problem I find with the Chinese action.
Well, I think I need to get out.
And it's going to lead to trouble. I mean.
Yeah, but look who's causing the trouble.
They go and they squat on these islands that are in dispute, and then they claim the waters as their territorial waters.
Hang on, Joe, how can they squat on islands that are their property, according to the Cairo Compact? We're talking about a treaty here. How's it in dispute?
That's to the Filipinos and the Vietnamese about that treaty. They haven't given up. It's still, I thought, it was still in the World Court in The Hague, and it still hasn't been definitively ruled upon. I mean,
under that same logic, there's a lot of lands in the United States that are still under dispute. I mean, ask anybody in Mexico. They think that California and Nevada ought to be part of Mexico now. Does that, justify them coming on up and trying to take the place over?
It comes to, and this is why everything comes down to when you have the muscle, you can keep your sea lanes of communication open. And if the Chinese want to impede our travel through what we consider international waters, then they better have the muscle to stop us. And that's my point.
So your philosophy is might makes right.
No, my philosophy is as long as we're following international law. Then it's nice to be mighty and strong to be able to stop people that want to claim things that don't belong to them from taking it from you. Just like Mexico. Mexico can say that Texas belongs to them, but they're going to have to take it by force.
I'm going to drop you if you don't let me talk. Okay. You admitted earlier in the show that the problem is that American ships are sailing within the 12-mile territorial barrier. So, barrier rather, the border with these islands. So that's not international waters.
I thought they were. I might be.
No, they're not.
I thought they were. I thought they were not. They were in international waters. That's usually that was what they do.
No, China has responded. The U.S. has sailed their warships within the 12-mile barrier, the 12-mile limit, and that's when China reacts. And the same thing with Taiwan. There's an international channel that goes between Taiwan and the mainland. And as long as foreign ships, including the United States, stay there, China doesn't do anything. But when the United States starts sailing close to Taiwan itself or closer to mainland China, then it gets to be an issue. And, I'm not.
I think it's wrong.
Yes.
I think what our country's doing in that regard is wrong. But I do support if the Chinese, if we are going into their territorial waters, then they have every right to harass our ships. But I didn't think that that's the case. That's not what I had heard. I heard they harass. They're claiming waters beyond the 12 miles as their waters, which aren't, and that's the whole dispute. So you're right. If they are violating their territorial waters, that to me, that's what the issue is. But then you would be right. Our ships are in the wrong. But that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the Chinese are claiming waters that aren't theirs as and their international waters. That's why we're trying to maintain international water.
Excuse me. Do they call it the International Sea?
Well, you can call it anything you want. I mean, it's the Gulf of Mexico, but we have a ton of that.
It's called the South.
It's called the Gulf of Mexico, and I swim in it all the time off Texas and off Florida and off Alabama. It's called the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, I'm sure you go swimming off the coast of the Spratlys as well. Okay. The problem is,
Guyana.
Let's look at the situation with Iran. Let's look at the situation with Iran, where we're now finding out that when the Iranian ships supposedly harassed the U.S. warships were inside an active drill zone that belonged to Iran. They were in Iranian waters where an Iranian drill was taking place. They were informed, there's a drill here. They were asked to leave. They refused to do so. So who's provoking who in this circumstance?
Well, I would say the Americans are. I'm not saying that everything we do is right. I'm not saying that at all. I know that. I know they're provoked. They're playing games with the Iranians. The Iranians send speedboats at our boats, and it's a tit for tat little game of cat and mouse they like to play over there. I know. I've been through there a lot, but that's apples and oranges. What I want to talk about is the Chinese and what they're doing, and the fact that sooner or later we're going to end up being at war with the Chinese. And it's probably
you do remember that China is a nuclear power, right?
Yeah, well, that's true. I know, but at the same time, we're headed for. You can't deny the fact that we're headed for a war with the Chinese. It's pretty.
Yeah, I can. If the United States would remember that our side of the Pacific Ocean is over on the West Coast, with California and everything, and stop sticking our noses into the other side of the Pacific Ocean, war could be avoided.
Well, the bioweapon.
What the heck are we doing over on that side of the ocean? What are we doing over there?
Well,
I mean, out to Hawaii, maybe to Guam.
I'm not going to disagree with you.
Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with you on that at all. I'm just saying that what the Chinese did is going to cause some kind of retribution, and sooner and we're going to probably be at war with them.
Who acted first? The U.S. went in and sent their Navy over to the other side of the Pacific, basically going into the areas that China and Japan, for that matter, Japan, consider their own. And that, by the way, is a big part of what led to the attack on Pearl Harbor.
We've been keeping sea lanes open for 200 years with our Navy. I mean, that's been one of our objectives.
Why is it our job?
As a big trading partner. Because that's part of our keeping trade open, and we had to fight World War II, and we have a big Navy, and
yeah, but
somebody's going to do it.
You just admitted that, as long as people stay in the international waters, the sea lanes of communication are open.
Right. That's what we have to maintain. That's why we have a Navy. But now it's been used and polluted into a force projection force, but that's the way it is. I mean, we're an empire now. We are an empire. Let's face it.
All empires fall. Anyway, Joe, the phone lines are loading up here, and I've given you a big chunk of time, so we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. Switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up? I just had to call when I heard Joe. Okay? Hey, Joe, you want to go fight?
No.
You want your kids? I don't know if you got kids. You want them? You want to fight? Okay? I don't care if you were in the Navy before. We got no business. Sorry, I was eating some nuts. You got no business over there, Joe. South China Sea is called the South China Sea for a reason. We need to bring our troops home. We can bring our Navy home. Take care of our own problems. That's why I'm voting for if Ventura runs. I have a lot of problems with Ventura, especially with his global, with his climate change nonsense. But I will still vote for him because I believe Jesse Ventura will bring an end to this evil empire. And that's what the American empire is, just like any other empire. It's evil. It needs to be ended, and we need to have our great republic back. Okay? We never were meant to be an empire. Empires, by their very nature, are evil. We got no business over there in China. We got no business over there by Iran. You got no business defending Israel or any other country. You got no business in NATO, European business. You got no business in any of that stuff other than protecting our own country. By the way, we need to. I personally, if I was president, I would reduce our military budget by at least 3/4. We still have enough to blow up the rest of the world if it really came down to it. You mess with China, you're messing with a nuclear power. I believe in a conventional war. Either China or Russia would probably kick our butts because I don't think our troops have any morale left. Good reason. And if you try to introduce a draft, you're going to have holy hell. You're going to have riots, insurrections, mutinies, make the Vietnam War look like a Sunday school picnic. There's no way we can beat either Russia or China.
Got to put you on hold. Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you after these commercials. And welcome back to our show. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina. And Mark, just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I just want to say, Mike, first, another thing, too, I don't believe China purposely launched the bioweapon, all right? If it was a bioweapon, I think Bill Gates and company were in charge, and Fauci. So if you want to bomb somebody, bomb Seattle, because that's what, Seattle's where Gates has his offices and stuff, or Silicon Valley. Because those are the ones who would probably be responsible for this if it was a bioweapon, all right?
Well, if it was a bioweapon, it's not a very good one.
It wasn't. I'm worried that Mike, this is my theory, okay, and then I'm going to hang up. I think these globalists want to cause World War III now. They see their what they pulled with this COVID-19 is now they're losing it, okay? Yes. They're not getting through. People are getting wise to Gates, Fauci, everything else. Their next step, now if they launch something like a weaponized Ebola, it'll hit them too. Okay, they won't be able to hide in their bunkers because people will know where they are, and there'll be enough survivors that'll haul them out. I think their next step is to start World War III, including the possibility of a nuclear war, where they feel they can hide in their bunkers, and once everything is over, they can come back and inherit the earth and turn themselves into robots or whatever else these madmen think. These are psychopaths. And when you go along with this China nonsense, Joe, you're just playing into their hands. That's all you're doing. Okay? That's all anybody is doing. We don't need war. We need peace. We need to stop this stuff. We don't need an empire. Empire is evil. I call it the evil American empire, just like it was before the evil Soviet empire and the evil British empire before that. We need to bring our troops home and become a constitutional republic again. And that's all I got to say, Mike. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to, looks like, Ale in New Jersey. Hello, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi. That Joe is such a warmonger. I mean, I have so many points as I was writing them down. First of all, the U.S., the news, the mainstream media lies and lies through their teeth, and they're hand in glove with the feds. How do we know that they're telling the truth, that China is responsible for this virus? And number two, they may have been doing the lab work, but the U.S. funded them. Isn't that in the news? Okay. Yes. And then the next one is that we owe China trillions of dollars, and this is a way to get out of it. You know?
Yes.
Starting all of this. And this Joe, he wants to start a war. Well, let him go in, even if he's been in the military. Why should I send my family to fight a war that he wants to fight? You know?
Yes.
So that's about it. That's it.
Well, thank you for the phone call, and thank you for the heartfelt commentary. We're going to switch over to Keith Rogers. Hello, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I want to say that Joe made some good points there, Mike. When the Afghan papers came out that 100,000 civilians were killed, then the Afghan government, or Taliban, or whoever they want to call themselves over there, they should be able to sue America. The same thing when Bush went in there to Iraq, the 500,000 dead children that were starved to death, they should be able to sue for that. And then on top of that, when Bush Jr. went in there and killed over 1 million, they should be able to sue for that, plus all the crimes of torture and stuff. Then we have Libya, the 50,000 dead there. They should be able to sue for that. Syria should be able to sue for the 300-some thousand dead there. And then we have these continual Central American wars, as well as the millions starved by starvation by the United States under these sanctions there, Cuba included there with all the ruckus they've caused down there since the 50s. And then we get over to the Secretary Pompeo, who threatens the ICC courts for even checking into their war crimes. And the U.S. abiding by international law, that has got to be the biggest joke in the world. And then we have the financial extortions of country after country, the overthrowing of 81 democracies up to the year 2000, and they still ain't done. And these were democratic elected, you know, putting in their fascist dictators like Pinochet and these guys like that who ruled with an iron fist like that, killing their own people. And what we see in South America and Central America, the so-called shock doctrine that was also used by Thatcher, even tried in Russia, which it would cause Russia to collapse. I think this is what America is going through now, is our version of Milton Friedman's shock doctrine. But
Yes.
if everyone wants to get their skin in the game, then America rightly should be sued for the, well, in what, since the 50s with the 900,000 in Indonesia that were systematically killed by a checklist by the CIA, East Timor, El Salvador, all these places should be able to sue the United States for what they've done to those countries. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, and the same thing with this damn border wall. If they would have spent
Hey,
billions of dollars building schools
Keith.
and stuff, no, that's right. I'll hop off here. But if they would have spent billions of dollars building schools and helping governments out, they wouldn't need a border wall. Have a good day. Okay, there, Mike.
All right, thanks. We'll be back after these few commercials. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Bruce in Texas. Bruce, welcome. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike.
Aloha.
Yeah, all right. Hey, first I'm going to touch on that NASA manned vehicle issue. You know, they used ballistic missiles 40 years ago, or whatever it was. Yeah, 40 years ago. They had no problems putting satellites, military satellites, up in space. They still have the Atlas booster, and it uses the Russian design, the regenerative rocket that provides about 25% more thrust. Why the heck don't they just use a ballistic missile to put astronauts in orbit, at least to reach the space station? I don't get it.
Wait. The Atlas V is a very useful workhorse for satellites, but the Dragon space capsule, the one that's being built to take the astronauts to the ISS, is much larger and much heavier. And I know a lot of people said, well, why develop a whole new space launch system? Just rebuild more of the Saturn Vs. Well, it turns out that, all the jigs that were used to build the Saturn V have all been long ago scrapped. And they figured out it would cost just as much to rebuild the Saturn V as it is to develop the space launch system.
Right, okay, that's understood. For China, we need to look back at the history of the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy has been the long arm of the globalists, the corporations, the moneyed interest in the United States and in the West, going back almost to its whole history. You need to look at the Philippines and what happened there. There was a huge genocide that no one ever talks about.
Yes.
And you need to look at Pearl Harbor. There was foreknowledge. They baited the Japanese into attacking their own base, claimed that it was a surprise attack when they actually knew that the fleet was on the way. You have the Gulf of Tonkin incident. You have the USS Liberty that was papered up. They allowed their own sailors to get killed, as part of a false flag operation. You have over and over again, the commander of an aircraft carrier turned it around on 9/11 after he heard the first plane crash into the World Trade Center without even having orders. Now, that tells me he had some kind of foreknowledge that this operation was already in the bag. And so, to the caller in Houston, read General Smedley Butler's paper. War is a
War is a
racket.
racket.
And that's all you need to know. War
Yeah.
is a racket. It certainly is. And I'm former Marine Corps. I was in the 1st Recon Battalion, so, I didn't polish, wings or work at a chow hall. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but, I'm no peacenik. I believe in defending the United States, but I don't believe in aggression on behalf of moneyed interest. And that's what's going on here. Have you heard of the GOP strategy paper that's put out to all their candidates? It was broken by Politico. It's called the GOP China memo.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you look at Fox News, and they're beating the drum. It's all propaganda.
Yes.
It's all propaganda, and it's just no coincidence that the U.S. military had a contingent in Wuhan, China, in October, and they were quartered close to the Wuhan wet market. And then in November, the CDC had a job announcement out, November 15th starting, so it was prepared before then for quarantine managers, high-level GS quarantine managers in about 18 cities in the United States, November 15th. So, come on, we need to keep all this in the mind. We're being lied to again, just like 9/11, just like we have in the past.
Yes.
And that's what I got to say.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you very much. Thank you much for your military service, because I don't have an issue with the soldiers and sailors and air people. It's just how they're being used by our so-called civilian leadership. We're going to let you go here and switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, real quick, Mike, before I talk anything going on in the real world, I just want to give thumbs up to Lenny. He mentioned Sliders. That was last week. Great sci-fi show I used to watch on TV, and I bought the DVDs. Lenny, 2 thumbs up. All right, Mike. Mike, my source, he's a horse, of course. He told me if this was a bioweapon, we'd all be dead. Nobody would be calling into the show right now.
Yes.
Come on, Joe. For Pete's sake. Come on, man. Joe is not a warmonger. He calls in with some good stuff. Man, dude, come on. Bioweapon, we got to have to respond. Dude, where are you getting your information from? One America News, Fox News, these, and NBC, CBS, they all have their agendas, but so does the other side. Judge Janine, she even has the Wuhan, the Wuhan, Tucker Carlson, I like him, but, he also went on about the China. I mean, it's just, none of these people are our friends, guys. Sean Hannity's never coming over for a beer. Trump's never coming over for a beer. Okay, so I mean, these guys on Fox News, CBS, none of them are your friends. They get paid a lot of money to lie to you. They read off a script. That's what people just don't seem to get. They read off a script. If they won't read off a script, they'll find somebody who will. Okay, so please stop pushing this to China. You're gonna attack China. They got a 2 million man army. You ain't gonna attack nothing. Okay, come on now. What are you gonna storm the beaches? Come on, guys. Think about things before you speak. Why would China? Think about this for a second, Mike. You talked about that. Why would China hurt their own economy? They're on top of the world, guys. 85% of the world's manufacturing, I believe, right, Mike? Like, why would they ruin? That don't make sense. The only people that would gain is from Joe. Toward the end, you said we're an empire that's threatened. Okay? That's what it's about. The rules-based international order. That's what Theresa May said, right? The rules-based international order. That's just empire talk. That's talk for empire. And Joe, you said it. We got the Philippines. I don't want the Philippines. What about it for the Philippine people? What about the Hawaii for the Hawaiian people? Isn't that their right to choose, not to put puppets in like the last caller said in Argentina and all these other countries? We're an empire in decline. We're trying to protect what we got, like a mafia. I got what I got. I got to protect my turf. That's what this is all about, okay? The virus, is it real? Is it fake? I think it's real. I think it's man-made, natural. It's not man-made. I think it's natural, like the SARS or MERS, just it's kind of weird it happened at this particular time when our economy's bad. But come on, guys, we got to keep it you guys got to do research. You just can't throw out It's a bioweapon. You know, they hate us. The Chinese are here and there. I mean, geez, we're squatting all over the world, aren't we, Mike?
Yes, we are.
I mean, Iraq was a lie. Libya, Syria, 500,000 people died. 375 to 500,000. And Mike, 100,000 of those people was Syrian soldiers, which are Sunni.
Yes.
You know, so everybody got to keep that in mind. Look at who we funded. And I got to go back to Trump. He put in Mike Pompeo, Gina Haspel, right?
Yes.
Elliot Abrams, the South American guy, right, who's at death squads. Trump gave the white helmets not once but twice $5 million. So we got to keep it in context. Trump put all these people in. Mike Pompeo, the one who's saying all these crazy things. So if Trump's the captain of the ship, then the buck stops with him.
Yes.
Okay? So don't blame the Chinese are the Chinese perfect? No. They want to be empire. Who don't? You know, who don't want to be empire? Mike, if me and you and the rest of the callers, if we had a chance to be on top, we might not say we want to, but it's just like a human behavior. You know, my gang going to be on top. You know, your gang ain't going to. You know, it's just a human nature. It's tribal. You know, but I mean, we got to keep this in perspective. Like, but for the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, who's been engaged in all this crap around the world? That's all I got. Well, I want everybody to think about that. For the last 40 years, 60 years, Joe, you said 200 years. How about 250? You know, all empires come to an end. You know, so now you're going to have to leave with extortion against the Chinese. Yo, you got to give me $3 trillion for my for the heartache this country's, you know, us and Britain, because, you know, we're the two countries. And by the way, Joe, it started in October, and they knew about it here in October, and they held on to it, like holding on to the last $5 they got in their wallet because they wanted to use it for a rainy day. And that's what I believe. And like Peter Navarro, all these other guys Trump put in, they're all xenophobes, Chinophobes, and you see what he said the other day. They're going to go after our electrical grid now. So I mean, it's the same bunch. Trump put in the same bunch of neocons. And that's what it comes down to, Mike. Like, but that's all I got to say, Mike. Have a good night. Hope Claire's doing good. Say hi. Bye.
Doing fine. She's doing fine. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Peter, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Mike, I want to start out by saying just one thing. First, Ryan Dawson has been kicked off the web.
Yes.
And that's worrisome to everybody. Secondly, we don't know who started this. Trump and all the intelligence agencies that said that there were weapons in Iraq and everything else. You know, we don't know it. Look at everything with a very jaundiced eye, and that's the second thing I want to say. But the basic thrust of what I'm calling, Mike, that took only about 40 seconds, is that it's. I'm looking forward to how we come out of this, Mike, and what kind of society is going to sustain 90 million unemployed, nobody with a pension or a 401k, all their houses underwater. What sort of society can survive 90 million grapes of wrath, the Joad family on the road?
Yes.
Right? And the answer to that is an intensely repressive society. There's no political system that could survive that wouldn't be just utterly repressive to keep us down. And that's why you can now be denounced for not having a mask on. You can be denounced for not keeping the right space. You can be denounced for going to a public park or going to church. You can't assemble. It's hard to get your arms around all the people that are surveilling us, from Amazon and all the corporations like LinkedIn, Facebook, blah, 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 to the NSA, to the Israelis, to the Five Eyes. Everything we have is completely theirs to take. Nobody protects us from the software malware guys that are just, running crazy. But you can be denounced for being anti-Semitic, for just criticizing Israel. You can be denounced because you want to use your own spending habits and don't want to support. You want to support the BDS movement and don't want to support with your own money buying an Israeli product. You can be denounced by your neighbor or anybody you know or don't know because they think you're a danger and they may think you have a firearm and they can confiscate your firearms. You know, there's so many. We're taking it from so many angles here, and it's getting worse all the time. And and I know they must look at it that way, because how else would any political regime survive what's coming? What do you think about that, Mike?
I'm in total agreement here. I mean, this country was messed up long before coronavirus, long before the economic downturn. You could basically see the deterioration. And if you look at how much damage one little virus has caused to the country, shows you it had no internal strength and no resilience whatsoever.
And by the way, Michael, I'm a formerly military trained nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare qualified officer, and I can tell you that this could easily be. There are bioweapons come in all flavors. Just like you have the 0.5 kiloton nuclear weapon, you also have the 60 megaton Tsar bomb. They come in all, bioweapons come in all flavors. So because it didn't kill everybody, maybe it's a limited one that only meant to kill economies. We don't know what's going on. But I can tell you have to look at this stuff with there's no proof of it from anybody. The one caller called about what was going on in Wuhan and the military games, where we've been subsidizing these guys all over the world. They're in Australia, they've admitted, in Africa, they're in Europe, they're in South America. There are all these little labs that we're subsidizing for biowarfare. You just can't trust anything. And they're not going to throw Fort Detrick open to inspection, as we're asking the Chinese to do for Wuhan, which, by the way, of course, we subsidize. But you know, so all that stuff is specious. You need to use your own head with that, and it's instructive that they're heating up in the Gulf of Tonkin, in the South China Sea, and everywhere else. They're asking for reparations, as that one gentleman was talking about. Think of the reparations that we would owe, that other gentleman said. It's exactly right. But there were many things wrong. The economy was crashing, or set to crash, inevitably. The finance system was going to crash. We had lost our manufacturing and banking ascendancy. And so we have every reason to want to take China down. But we also have every reason not to fight China, because that other guy was right. You know, we mobilized 91 divisions in World War II when we were producing half the world's stuff. Now they're producing 85% of what the world is doing, and they could mobilize 10,000 divisions. I want you to think about that. And half of those divisions could be made up of nothing but high IQ people. They could kick our butts from 6 ways from Sunday in a conventional war.
There's no way to invade the Chinese mainland successfully. It just couldn't be done.
Oh, no, Bernard Montgomery said there are 2 rules of war. Never invade Russia, never invade China. Those are the 2 rules of war.
Yes.
And we certainly can't. We couldn't do it in the 30s, let alone now. But it's ridiculous. So how do we confront them? How do we keep it from slipping from our hands, the superiority and empire and financial and hegemony that we've had for years and years? Well, something like this is very viable. There's all these crazies in there that were viable, that were crazy enough to, they'll use it on our own people, just like we marched our people through nuclear blasts. That's it. I'm sorry, Mike. That's it for me. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for commercials. We got 2 more callers waiting on the line. We'll be back for the last segment of our program after these 2 words. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today here. And before we go back to the phones here, I just want to mention I have reposted to the main page of whatreallyhappened.com Mark Twain's The War Prayer. And I would ask all of you, especially Joe, to read that. Mark Twain wrote it in his late years and then left instructions it was not to be published until after his death. That'll tell you how strong it's going to be. All right, back to the phones. Mark in Georgia, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
My brother, I don't know how long it takes to produce, turn down the fan. I don't know how long it takes to produce a peer-reviewed journal article about why the official numbers of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-1984. But my brother said, well, I want to see a peer-reviewed scientific journal, that I know that it's authentic. And I was like, just because something's peer-reviewed, just because it's in a scientific journal doesn't make it true. Since when is truth to democracy? But I was wondering, do you know of a peer-reviewed scientific article that debunks the official numbers?
Not yet, but as you point out, the big scandal of science these days is how many of these so-called peer-reviewed articles are phony. They're full of bad data. And it's kind of hard. There's literally nowhere we can go to get trustworthy information.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that, we're in agreement that truth is not a democracy. If 1,000 liars say the same lie, that doesn't make it true. A million or even a billion sycophants agree with that lie doesn't make it any more true. Truth it exists.
Look how many people thought the Earth was flat.
Well, or believe that the sun went around the Earth. Either way, and then it turns out the sun is just another star among billions and billions, and now Carl Sagan knows better after all those years being an atheist. But that's not you're more like the guy that I had a conversation with, that he had a button that read, "Thank God I'm an atheist." I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But, I've got the house cat flu, right?
Yes.
It's contagious, and another 30 or 40 years is going to cause me to die, but in the meantime, I'm putting up with it. But I still need to send you that link for the Simpsons house cat flu, where the media got together to plan on what the next big thing to scare everyone with. But like I say, maybe somebody who can find that peer-reviewed scientific journal. I don't know how long it takes to produce such things, but the problem is that sometimes you got to get through to people when the government is shoveling out money for a predetermined end, like the androgenic global warming fiasco. When they shovel out money for a particular end, it's kind of like using fish guts for shark repellent. Just shovel out more fish guts. You're gonna get people that are going to, for the sake of funding, are going to go along with whatever brings funds into their whatever. And if it's totally bogus,
it's called the golden rule
I'll
of science.
send you that link. And if you could find an article like that, I've been trying to say, look, the one thing I've learned in life is that when the media across the board, left and right alike, when they pound on something, you need to look at what they're actively avoiding bringing to light, like the fact that after all these years, we still have no disclosure of the evidence given to the Taliban. And I twice lawfully demanded them of Representative Phil Gingrey. He produced not one shred of evidence. Anyway, that's all different subject. So
I got to let you go. Mark, I got to let you go. I'm sorry. I apologize to our remaining two callers. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please spread the word of RBN, spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We need your help. And thank you to all those who have donated. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.